Hey guys, welcome back to another Clash Royale video, and today we're going to be talking about the next round of balance changes in Clash Royale, because right now is nearing the end of July, which means we have another season starting out very soon, which means hopefully we should have another round of balance changes coming out soon, and roughly 1 week away from today. So what I wanted to do today, guys, is I want to share with you my personal balance change wish list, all of the cards that I want to see buffed or nerfed or redesigned in the next balance update. So I have this website right here, guys, pulled up, Royale API. It is a fantastic website for finding the use rates and the win rates of cards and decks in Clash Royale. I will leave a link for the website, guys, down below in the description. Give it a look if you are interested. But in this page here, guys, I have all of the stats of all of the cards pulled up in Clash Royale according to the past 7 days in Grand Challenges. And the reason I use Grand Challenge stats, not ladder stats, is because Grand Challenges have tournament standard, equal level gameplay, whereas ladder has unequal levels, and it makes your stats a bit more unreliable because a card might be over leveled on ladder and it might have a higher win rate because it is over leveled. But on Grand Challenges, you have equal level stuff. So, starting out with my Nerf list, I have 3 cards on my Nerf list for you guys today, and all 3 happen to be the top 3 most popular troop cards in Clash Royale right now: the Baby Dragon, the Lumberjack, and the Bats. So the Baby Dragon, guys, like, no explanation really needed here. It's been by far the most dominating troop card in Clash Royale for the past several seasons in a row, and it's only been increasing in popularity month after month. And I think it is finally time the Baby Dragon gets a nerf, especially because I have another card later on in the video that I do want to mention to help compete with the Baby Dragon. But 30% use rate right now, very high. It's just an overall just very strong card in Clash Royale. Now, I don't want them to kill the card. I still want it to be viable, so I only suggest a very tiny nerf. Maybe a health decrease very slightly, so it dies, 1 hit earlier in certain interactions, or maybe a slower attack speed by 0.1 seconds slower. Just a very tiny nerf to kind of just bring it into check and not be as OP and popular as it is right now. Because right now, like, almost every deck in Clash Royale runs Baby Dragon. So I think we can all agree that it might need a bit of a nerf. Card 2 is Lumberjack. Similarly, the single most popular troop card, ground card in Clash Royale right now. It works in almost every deck in the game, and it's just very strong. And I think it needs a slight nerf as well. Like, when I say nerf a card, guys, I don't mean like crazy. I don't mean kill the card. What I suggest is either a health decrease, like the Baby Dragon, so it dies, 1 attack earlier in certain interactions, or a slower attack speed by 0.1 second. Just very tiny nerfs to bring the Lumberjack kind of more in check with the other cards in Clash Royale. And the third card, guys, on my nerf list is the Bats. This is an interesting card. This might be a controversial suggestion here to nerf the Bats. The reason I want to see the Bats nerfed is I find them to be a super rock, paper, scissors card and very matchup dependent. What I mean by that, let's say you have 2 spells in your deck. Let's say you're running Fireball Log or Fireball Bar Barrel. If you face Bats in a battle and you don't have Zap or Snowball, they are one of the most frustrating cards ever to deal with. They do so much damage so fast that if you don't have an immediate response for them, they just do so much work, right? Like, if you run Log Spell or Barbarian Barrel against Bats, you can't do anything. They just destroy everything. If you run Zap Spell, the Bats are basically useless, right? So I feel like, they should have a slight damage decrease with those Bats, so that it isn't as, rock, paper, scissors if you don't have Zap Spell in your deck. But if they do that, if they do nerf the damage of the Bats, I would suggest that they buff the damage of the Night Witch to compensate, because obviously she spawns Bats, and, if you nerf Bats, it nerfs her as well. So maybe buff the damage of Night Witch, but nerf the bat damage overall. And that way, like, if you don't have Zap Spell, it isn't as bad as it is right now. Because, you know, for example, if I have Goblin Gang in my deck, you know, Zap and Log both do work, right? Zap doesn't kill all the goblins, but it still helps, right? Whereas if you have bats, the Log or Barb Barrel is basically useless, right? So those are the 3 cards on my nerf list: Baby Dragon, Lumberjack, and Bats. Let's go ahead, you guys, move on to my buff list. I have a bunch of cards that I want to see buffed in Clash Royale. Personally, I think buffing cards is more fun than nerfing them. But the first card on my buff list, guys, is right here, the Log Spell. Still with the most recent nerf to the Barbarian Barrel, the Log Spell still isn't quite as popular as it ever was. So I suggest simply a damage increase for that Log Spell, because the number one thing you can do with a log that you can't do with Barb Barrel, well, number one is knock things back, but number 2 is damage a tower. You can't hit a tower directly with the Barbarian Barrel. So if you buff the damage for a Log Spell, it might make it more worthwhile to have in your deck for that kind of like chip damage adding up over time by hitting a tower. Also, if you buff the damage of Log Spell, if it does become more popular, it would help kind of keep the Prince and the Dark Prince in check, because obviously Log can knock back the Princes, whereas Barbarian Barrel can't. So number 1 card, guys, on my buff list is a buff to the Log Spell. Now moving on here, guys, the next card on my buff list, by the way, you might recognize most of this list because I recently discussed it with Ash on one of his videos recently on his channel, which I will leave a link down below as well if you are interested. We did a collab with Bufferetti and CWA, where we shared our balanced wish list, and a lot of those cards on my list then are still on my list now. Next on my buff list, guys, is Wall Breakers. Wall Breakers were introduced in February. It is now almost August, and there's still 0% use rate and just a very bad win rate as well. They just need some love. They seriously need some love. They're an epic card. They don't really feel epic, and just, I don't know, man. It's just a very underwhelming card overall. And I know, like, I want to apologize directly to the Supercell team, because I'm very, very harsh on card balancing, especially new cards. So I do want to apologize for that. But I just feel like right now in Clash Royale, we have over 90 cards in the game, and you only get a certain amount of cards out of chests. So I feel like if you're going to add more cards into the game, they have to be good, impactful cards that are viable into the game. Otherwise, what's the point of having them in there, right? Like, having Wall Breakers, all it does is just kind of waste your card pulls from chests. Get an epic chest, get a magical chest, boom, you get Wall Breakers. Like, it feels wasted. Whereas if they were viable, then it might feel, you know, better. So I feel like they just need the Death Bomb. I mentioned it in CWA's video. They need to have that Death Bomb. When they die, they deal a bit of splash damage around them, because number 1 is it makes them feel more epic, right? Right now they kind of just feel like common cards. And number 2 is it makes them more versatile. You can use them on defense as well, because Wall Breakers are obviously a Bridge Spam card, but we already have Bridge Spam. We already have, you know, Battle Ram and Ram Rider, etc., etc. But the benefit of having a Battle Ram or a Ram Rider in your Bridge Spam deck is versatility. You can use Ram Rider on defense if you need to. You can use Battle Ram on defense if you need to, but you can't use Wall Breakers on defense if you need to, because they don't really do anything. So I feel like if they had that Death Bomb, obviously it could do less damage than a regular attack does, maybe with a smaller radius, but it would make them more versatile and work in a different, in wider variety of decks as well. So that's my buff suggestion, guys, for the Wall Breakers, is making them have that Death Bomb. The next card on my buff list is another new card in Clash Royale, which is the Fisherman. Like I said, guys, I apologize to the Supercell team, because I know I'm very, very harsh, especially on new card releases. But I just feel like they should be impactful, meta-changing cards whenever they add a new card into the game, because they're like, having a new card release is exciting. We wait, you know, a month and a half for every new card release, and new card comes and it's disappointing, and then we just kind of wait another month and a half for the next one. So I feel like if they, you know, when they add new cards, they should be, you know, impactful into the meta, and the Fisherman just ain't it chief, right? Because Fisherman, here's the thing, guys. Fisherman competes with Tornado Spell. Tornado Spell is 1 less elixir, hits air, hits everything, deals splash damage, is way more versatile than the Fisherman. Because Fisherman, number 1, is 1 more elixir, does not hit air, hits 1 unit at a time, has a very slow hook speed, and is very easy to distract. So I feel like there's a couple of options here with the Fisherman. Number 1 is it needs more health. It needs a lot more health than it has right now. Like, I would say 10 to 15% or more health increase, because it just dies way too fast at the moment. Number 2 is it needs a faster hook mechanic, because it's so slow right now. Watching a Fisherman try and pull like a Skarmy, for example, is so slow. Each skeleton, it pulls it, it hits it, you know, slow wind up speed, pulls it, hits it. So 2 ideas here. Obviously, number 1 is if it is, you know, attacking multiple units, the pull speed between units should be faster overall. And number 2, my idea here is the Fisherman should always have his anchor swinging, right? As it is right now, when you use Fisherman into the arena, he doesn't do anything. He walks. When he finds a target in range, then he starts swinging his anchor. He should always have that anchor swinging when he's walking, and that way he's ready to pull immediately when he finds a target. That's my idea 2 for buffing the Fisherman. Idea 3 is he needs to hit air. It feels kind of just weird right now not hitting air. And it's the main reason why I feel like having a NATO spell would just be more versatile, because it creates this rock, paper, scissors meta where if you have Fisherman and you face air, it's useless. Whereas if you have Tornado Spell and you face air, it's a lot better, right? So I feel like it needs to hit air. Also, or, you know, one of the 2 maybe, is it needs to deal impact damage as well. When it pulls itself towards a building or pulls a unit towards itself, it should deal double damage on impact, because it just needs a buff overall. So those are my ideas for buffing the Fisherman. There's a lot of ideas as well. Maybe all of them together might be too strong, but I would say definitely 3 out of the 4 ideas. More health, you know, faster hook speed, and then either hitting air or impact damage would be the 3rd idea. Or if you don't want to do any of those things, just make it 3 elixir, right? That's my ideas for the Fisherman. Either do, you know, all those ideas that I suggested, or make it cost 3 elixir, because I think it's a really cool card. I think it's a really cool card that could have a good impact into the meta, but it just needs a bit of love to make it a bit more viable for the 4 elixir cost. And as I mentioned, guys, I just feel like every new card added into the game should be strong, should have a place in the meta, because, you know, otherwise what was the point of adding it, right? So the next card on my buff list, guys, is going to be the Royal Recruits. I also mentioned this in CWA's video. This is a very controversial card. A lot of the player base, I think, is just happy having it being a dead card, which I understand because it's considered a no skill card. But at the same time, I think it does need a bit of love. I suggest maybe like a 3% damage buff. That's it. Just a slight damage boost for the Royal Recruits to make them a bit more viable than they are right now. Because the Royal Recruits are another new card, or I say new in quotations, that was added into the game. They were absolutely broken for like a week. They absolutely destroyed the meta for a week. Then they were emergency nerfed, which I understand for sure. But since then, they have never seen a place in the meta, ever. They sat at 8 elixir for a couple months, and they went to 7, and still at 7, they just aren't really viable. And they were emergency nerfed, you know, about a year ago today. So ever since the introduction over a year ago, they were only in the meta for a week. And, you know, like I said, guys, adding new cards into the game, they should be impactful and meta changing. So I just give them a slight boost, 3% damage, and, you know, see where they go from there, right? Because obviously you don't want a similar situation where they are broken again. So I suggest a 3% damage boost for the recruits, and then kind of just see where they are from there. the last card here on my buff list, the final card, is the Magic Archer. This is a very simple change. Just undo the nerf they did back in the fall of last year. That nerf I feel like just came out of nowhere. I didn't think it was too OP back then when they nerfed it. And here we are now in coming August soon. Like 9 months since it was nerfed, and it just still really isn't really in the meta. So I suggest just undoing that nerf they did way back in the fall of last year, putting back to the way it was, and just make the Magic Archer viable again. But that is the end of my buff list, guys. We have Log buff, we have Wall Breaker buff, Fisherman buff, Royal Recruit buff, and Magic Archer buff. 5 cards that I want to see buffed in the next update. Moving on, guys, to my redesign list. Now, I have one request for you guys here before I share my redesign list. What I want you guys to do is judge my balance changes, my buff nerf list, separate from my redesign list, because some of these redesigns are pretty controversial. So let me know down below, guys, in the comments, do you like my buff nerf list? And do you hate my redesign list? Like, keep those judgments separate. So, number 1 card on my redesign list is the Giant Skeleton. Some of you guys might recognize this because I mentioned it in CWA's video. Redesign the Giant Skeleton to be a win condition where it targets buildings only, okay? Now, I know that's pretty crazy, but one of the things that I did not mention or I forgot to mention in that video with CWA is if you make it a win condition, you have to rebalance the stats accordingly. I failed to mention that in the CWA video, and a lot of people were very triggered because they're like, Shane, you know, Giant Skeleton targeting building that's way too strong. Well, obviously they would have to reduce the damage the Giant Bomb does to compensate. But the reason I suggest changing the Giant Skeleton is, as it is right now, it is a super defensive card, very, very frustrating to face against, because it really just slows down gameplay. Every time you go a big push, they go Giant Skeleton, destroys your entire push. And it feels like going up against this wall of just slow defensive gameplay. Every battle is like 7 minutes, and it leads to a lot of draws, okay? And also, the Giant Skeleton competes a lot with the P.E.K.K.A. and the Mega Knight for a big defensive card in your deck. But almost always you're better off with a P.E.K.K.A. or a Mega Knight in your deck because they're more versatile. So with Giant Skeleton, I suggest making it a win condition because that way you make it more offensive, less defensive, and hopefully you have a whole new archetype, a whole new deck that can be built into the game. But obviously you would have to adjust the stats accordingly. You know, maybe lower the health, lower the damage, lower the death bomb damage as well, especially because it targets buildings only. And yeah, that's the idea of the Giant Skeleton, guys. Just make the stats lower, make the damage lower, but make it target buildings only. The next card, I got 2 cards, guys, on my redesign list, is the Executioner. This one is another controversial idea that I mentioned in CWA's video that a lot of people didn't really like. And similarly, I failed to mention that redesigning it, you have to rebalance the stats accordingly. My idea for Executioner is to make it cost 4 elixir. Now, if you guys remember last month, in the last balance wishlist video I suggested changing the wizard to 4 elixir. Okay, I want to change my idea now to Executioner for a couple of reasons. Number 1 is I think that wizard at 4 elixir would overlap too much with Musketeer, whereas Executioner is a lot different than the Musketeer and would have its own kind of space in the 4 elixir ranged attackers. Also, Baby Dragon is a 4 elixir splasher that has more health than an Executioner, which I find a bit weird over here. That the Baby Dragon is 1 less elixir than Executioner, but has more health and it's flying. So half the cards in the game can't even target it. So you're telling me Baby Dragon can have more health than Executioner, can't be targeted by ground units, and has 1 less elixir? That's a bit strange to me. So I feel like if they made the Executioner a 4 elixir a high health splasher to compete with Baby Dragon, it'd be good for the game overall. You know, keep the health the same for Executioner, lower to 4 health. It would still survive Lightning Spell, because I feel like that's one of the reasons why Baby Dragon is so popular, is because it is a spell-resistant splasher. Keep the Executioner as a spell-resistant splasher, but lower the damage and lower the range to compensate for being 4 Elixir. So, to summarize, 4 Elixir Executioner, same health as right now, so same, spell-resistant splasher, but lower the damage and lower the range a bit to compensate for being 4 Elixir. On the topic though, guys, just as a side note here, for a Wizard, maybe one thing they could do with Wizard, I'm kind of just thinking of it right now, is lower the damage but increase the health. Because Wizard right now is absolutely insane. It dies to Fireball Zap, which is why it isn't as popular as a 5 Elixir Splasher, but the damage is absolutely absurd. So what if they lowered the damage of Wizard but increased the health? I don't know, just a random idea I just thought of right now. So that is my redesign list, guys. 2 cards redesign, Giant Skeleton win condition, Executioner 4 Elixir, rebalance the stats accordingly. 2 cards here that I want to mention briefly as a kind of like bonus list are the Bowler and the Zappies. In that video with CWA, I got a lot of feedback saying, what about Zappies? You guys didn't mention Zappies. Honestly, at this point in the game, I've just given up hope of Zappies. I've just given up hope because I've been asking, like, they've been on literally almost every balance wish list is a Zappy buff. And I've just lost hope at this point for Zappies. But the Bowler, this is an interesting one because the number one idea that I hear for Bowler is to make it knock back both princes. Okay? And that would, yeah, I agree, that would be very, very good. And it would push the Bowler into the meta for sure. However, a couple of issues with that. Number one is knockback goes by troop weight. Okay? Because the princes are kind of like a heavy class of weight, they don't get knocked back by knockback mechanic, with the exception of Log, because obviously Log is legendary and knocks back everything. But knockback goes by weight. So if the Bowler knocked back the princes, you would have to decrease the weight of the princes to get knocked back, which would also mean they got knocked back by Snowball and Fireball, which I think would make Snowball even more OP than it is right now, and would just be too much of a nerf for the princes if Fireball and Snowball both knocked them back. Also, it would make the Bowler a even more frustrating card to deal with, because the Bowler is super defensive. Similar to the Giant Skeleton problem, when Bowler is strong, it leads to very slow defensive gameplay, and it just kind of, battles overall become longer. So I feel like it wouldn't be good overall for the game because it would just be too slow. So I'm not too sure what they should do for the Bowler, but I don't think knocking back the princes is where it should be done, because you need to have a couple of cards that are resistant to knockback in order for like beatdown decks to have a chance of breaking through those defensive decks, because defensive decks can be some of the most frustrating decks to deal with in Clash Royale, and you need to have a few cards that can actually break through that defense in order for kind of like those beatdown decks to have a chance. So that is what I think of the Bowler kind of knockback suggestion idea. But guys, that is the end of my list. To summarize, Nerf list is Nerf Baby Dragon, Nerf Lumberjack, Nerf Bats, buff the Log, buff the Wall Breakers, buff the Fisherman, buff the Royal Recruits, and buff the Magic Archer. I think that's the end of my list, guys. Look at that. 10 cards overall that should be changed. Then obviously redesign the Giant Skeleton and the Executioner. Those ones are a bit more controversial. But let me know what you guys think of my list. Let me know what you think of my buff Nerf list, separate than what you think of my redesign list, because they are some pretty controversial ideas. And I want to ask you, if you had 10 cards only, 10 cards that you could buff, nerf, or redesign in the next balance update, what 10 cards do you want to see changed? Feel free to let me know, guys, down below in the comments down below. And hopefully in about 1 week from today, we should have some information on the next balance update, if we are getting one in August. because I am really kind of interested to see. I'm really hoping to see a couple of bigger changes that kind of like shake up the meta a bit. And I'm hoping to see some big buffs, especially for some of the newer cards added into Clash Royale recently. But guys, that is the end of the video. Let me know if you enjoyed it down below. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to more Clash Royale content. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We will see you in the next one.